Okay, so before we go into the how-to on how to take 360-degree panoramas, let's first just discuss what exactly is a 360-degree by 180-degree panorama. Usually when we're talking about normal panoramas, the first thing people think is, let's take one photo here, another one there, and then let's combine those two or three or four or five pictures on the computer or whatever. But the only thing that's different about a 360-degree panorama is that, yeah, we're going around 360 degrees like this and taking everything, but we're also capturing the ground underneath us and the sky above us. So we would be taking a row of shots aiming towards the ground, just like this. Shot, 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 till we got all the way around. Then we would tilt our camera up and make sure that the picture overlaps a little bit from the composition below that we just took. And then we would take another 360-degree panorama just like that, going all the way around. And then we would take another one going up all the way around so we get the sky and we get everything around us. So a 360-degree panorama is basically like it's a complete immersive view of the environment around you. The settings that I would use on your camera, I would recommend using manual mode. Usually always, because that ensures that the shutter speed, the aperture, the white balance, and the focusing point and the ISO are all the same with every single picture you take. So if I take a picture here and then take another one, those two pictures are going to have the exact same settings no matter what. So I'd highly recommend taking the pictures in manual mode. You can use automatic mode, and the panoramic software that we're going to be using can still stitch the pictures together, but I usually don't do that. I usually don't recommend that. Now there's two ways we can take panoramas. We can take it handheld, just like how I showed you, where you go around like this taking the pictures. The only problem with that method is that there's a lot of chance for error. The panoramic software can usually stitch handheld panoramas. Sometimes it does not look very good and it'll mess up. But I would say about 60% of the time it works fine. But the other 40%, you're going to want to be using a panoramic tripod head. This eliminates error completely, and it guarantees that you're going to have a perfect panorama. So I'm going to be showing you both methods. I'm going to be showing you how I take the pictures handheld, and I'm going to show you on the computer how to stitch those up. And then I'm going to be showing you how to use a panoramic tripod head. And I'm going to show you another example, and we're going to stitch that on the computer too. So for the first example, let's just do it handheld right here. The camera is going to be, this video camera is going to be in the shot and everything. And remember, I'm using small JPEGs. I'm not using large JPEGs, and I'm not taking the pictures in RAW format. This is especially useful if you're doing the panorama for the first time. I would highly recommend using small JPEGs for your first time, because when you're stitching the pictures, it'll take much less time and it's going to use less memory, and the file is just going to be much smaller and easy to handle compared to if you did it with large JPEGs or RAW files. So here we go. So for my settings here, I'm using 640th of a second at f5.6, ISO 200, and the white balance is on cloudy. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to automatically focus on an area over here. Okay, my camera is all focused because I use the autofocus. Now I'm going to switch to manual focus so that when I'm taking all the pictures around, the camera isn't going to refocus for each shot. So the focus is going to be consistent throughout the entire panorama. And on the exposure I'm using, if I take a picture, you can see that the ground is very dark right now, but the sky, I'm also capturing the highlights in the sky. I'm just going to make the foreground brighter later on the computer. So that's usually what I do when I'm taking panoramas like this, where I've got the really bright sky above me and the ground below me. I usually make it so I can see the highlights in the sky just a little bit, but also capture the detail in the ground. Now I'm going to be using this tree over here as my reference point. So for instance, I'm going to be starting at the ground here, and then I'm going to go around, take all the pictures, and then stop at that tree again. So that tree is basically a reference point of where I should start and stop, and then move up the camera and then go to the next row. So let's do this. Alright, that's it. Let's go on the computer and try to stitch up this panorama using the software. Alright, here's all the pictures we took, all 36 of them. Now, I didn't do an entire 360-degree panorama because as you can see in these shots, everything above the horizon was just blank, empty clouds. So I just said, you know what, I'm just gonna bag that and I'm gonna skip taking pictures of the sky because there's just not a lot of there's nothing detailed in the sky there. It's just a blank white space. If there was something more other than just plain whiteness of sky, I would tilt my camera up and do another row. And then I would tilt my camera straight up and take one last picture directly upward. And also, the ground here, I also forgot to take a picture aiming directly at the ground. Sometimes these pictures don't come out because you're taking them handheld. So usually the ground picture doesn't usually turn out that well. But if you wanted to do one anyway, just to see if you could get it to work, is you would just step out of the frame and then reach your arm out and then take a picture of the ground. Straight down. So here are the pictures. Now we're going to load them up into the program called Hugin. This is a free open source program that you can download from the internet. Just type in, it's actually pronounced Hugin. Just type in Hugin in Google and you'll find it right there, the first result. So I'm gonna select all my pictures here and drag them into Hugin. And now before I align the pictures, I want to make sure I go to File, Preferences, Control Point Detectors, and I want to make sure that I have Auto Pano Sift C as the default. Just click the button that says Set Default if it's not already selected. I think this is the one that is defaulted to right when you download Hugin, and that one does not work very well. So use Auto Pano Sift C. It'll take longer to align and stitch all the pictures together, but it's much more accurate. So after we loaded all the images, usually if you're using a DSLR with a digital lens, the focal length and the focal length multiplier will already be filled in for you. But if you're using some other sort of weird lens or a manual lens, something like that, you can just manually type that in there. So after we have all the images loaded, click the button that says Align. Now this one will pop up, and this takes a while. It might take, depending on how fast your processor is and how much RAM you have, it could take anywhere from 30 seconds to 5 to 10 minutes. So just let this move on, and I would also recommend closing down any programs you have running on your computer, because this Hugin program kind of requires a lot of memory and RAM and things like that. So just, close down other programs and let this do its thing. Okay, that took about 2 minutes. Now it gave me this little error thing. It says no parameters to optimize. Just click OK and go past that. Then it might give you this message here. It's basically telling you that Hugin could not stitch one or more groups of images together. So you can see here, it's basically telling me that there's one group of images, and that group contains image 0, 8, and 9. And this group needs to have some control points in this group. So let's just go through these really quick. Right here we can see that 5 and 6, those two images need to be connected. So let's click OK and just go there. Here's our window. Now let's select image 5 and image 6. Now you can see when we go to image 4 and 5, it's added some control points here. These are areas that are similar in one photograph that you can see in the other photograph. So for example, this control point that says number 0, that same little spot is the exact same spot in this photograph over here. Because when you're taking the panoramas, remember that you need to have about a 20% overlap for each picture that you take. But Hugin cannot always automatically detect the points in every single picture. It does do a pretty good job for the most part. But as we can see here, we just have to fix about 2 or 3 pictures and it'll be good to go. So let's start off with image 5 and image 6. So we're going to click the control points tab. And here we are, image 5 and image 6. So let's look at this and see what we have. Alright, so I just found a spot right here. This little piece of grass ends right here. There's a little point right there. And now it's the same piece of grass on this picture that's right here. And now it might give you this thing that says, hey, no, you're wrong. Just click OK and ignore that. And then usually when it does that, it'll reposition the control point. Just kind of move it back in its place. Alright, so those two are the same piece of grass. So now that I have them positioned correctly, just go down here and click the Add button. So now we have one control point. It's always good to have about 3 or 4 of them. So I'm going to make another one here. I can see here that there's a little bright piece of grass right here. And the same piece of grass is right here too on this photo at the very edge. So I'm just going to select the end of that right here. And I'm going to do the same thing over here on this one. Right there. Now I'll say that, but it's wrong, and I'm just going to reposition the point there. And click Add. So there we have 2. I'll do one more just in case. I'll do it on the other end of that thing. Right there. And do the same thing over here. Right there. Click OK. Reposition it. And then click Add. So there's 3 control points. I would maybe do 4 if you have the time. Alright, so now we have these groups right here. Any one of these images in this group right here needs to be connected to any of these images over here. So I can see that image 8 would probably, I could probably easily connect that to image 7. And I could connect image 9 to image 10. I could also do image 0 to image 1, and I think that's what I'm going to do. So let's go to image 0 and image 1 and see what we have. 0, 1. Alright, here we are. Now we just got to look carefully and find a spot that's identical in both of the pictures. This is kind of tricky. I mean, I'm already having a hard time identifying where to put the control points here. Okay, I found it. It's one here, right there, and one right over here, same spot. Let's just see if that works. We might need to add more later. Let's click a line, and it'll realign it, and it'll be a lot quicker this time. It's not going to take as long as it did last time. All right, so right after you click the align button and it's done finishing its thing, one of 2 things will happen. Either one, it will look good just like it is now, or it'll look extremely messy and weird. And if that's the case, if it's very messy and weird, I would just delete the images that you had to add control points to earlier. and then realign it and then see if it comes out any better at all. If you wanted to delete the images, I would just minimize this window and click the Images tab, and then go in here and find the image that is screwing up your picture, and then simply highlight it, and then click the button that says Remove Selected Images, and then realign the panorama. But we don't have to do that because it came out alright. So now we are inside the Fast Panorama Preview window, and this will pop up right after it's done aligning the pictures. So the first things first, you want to make sure that these sliders are on the very bottom and on the very right. Next, you want to make sure that this crop tab is not displaying any lines. As you can see here, there is a line right here and right here. And yours might do that, it might not. But in order to fix that, all you have to do is make left 0 and make top 0. And then for the right and the bottom fields, just max it out. So type in like 99999 or something, and then do the same for that one. And that will just completely get rid of those crop marks, and when you go to stitch your panorama, it'll be a full panorama, which is pretty important. Next, if you wanted to make it a stereographic planet, what you would do is click this projection tab right here, and click the drop down box, and then select stereographic. Then we would click the move and drag tab, zoom in a little bit using the slider, and then simply click and hold on the picture to reposition it. And you want to get the center point of this thing right where you took the picture. So if you wanted to make a tunnel, you can make a tunnel like that, or you could reposition it to get it completely centered just like that, and there is your tunnel. Now if you wanted to make a planet, all you have to do is click and drag again and just invert that sucker, and there's your planet. Now usually I don't make the planets and the tunnels inside of Huggin. I usually do that in another program called Flexify. It's actually a Photoshop plugin. The reason why is because I can't get this perfectly centered using Huggin. I can try to kind of move my mouse around to kind of guess and check and get it in the closest position possible to get it completely centered. But Flexify, what I can do with Flexify is make sure it's completely centered. Flexify works by first exporting an equal rectangular panorama just like this one. Let me straighten this really quick because that's kind of confusing. There we go. So what Flexify will do is after we export this panorama and bring it into Flexify, we can then convert this panorama to a stereographic version. So that's what I usually do. The only downside is that Flexify does cost money. So if you want to make a planet but you don't want to spend any money, I would just suggest making it inside of Huggin. So again, you would go to the projection tab, click stereographic, click the move and drag tab, zoom in, and then reposition the picture. And there you go. But for right now, let's stick to the equal rectangular and zoom out all the way, and then click. We could move and drag it by ourselves to fix it. But let's just click straighten, that little button straighten, it'll just do it automatically. Make sure you're zoomed out all the way. So now that's what our picture is going to look like. Now you can see here that you can actually see the little seam marks on the ends of each individual frame. Keep in mind that that's going to be removed once we export the final panorama. And also keep in mind that this is the Fast Panorama Preview window. If we close out of this window and then click View Preview window, this will bring up the more high quality version. and you can see that those seam marks are now gone. However, this takes probably like 3 or 4, maybe like 3 or 4 times longer to render this out. Whenever you make a little change, it'll take a few seconds. So I'm gonna click that window. It won't exit the program, so don't worry. You still got the main window right here. Next, if you want to, you can optimize all the different variables, and sometimes this makes it better. Usually what I do is just click, I'm going to optimize everything, and I'll click optimize now. It'll do its little thing, and then it'll bring up this window, and I want to apply the changes. And then if we go back into the preview window, sometimes it doesn't work very well and you can't see any noticeable difference, but other times it works pretty good. So you might want to try experimenting with that feature and just go back to the preview window after you've done it, just to make sure it hasn't screwed anything up, because sometimes it will. You can also see here, one other thing I forgot to mention was that there's just blackness, empty blackness on the top and bottom of this picture. That's because I stopped taking pictures when the horizon was on the bottom of the camera frame. I did this because, remember, if I just took pictures of that blank whiteness of sky, Hugin would most likely have a hard time stitching that area. So you can always try doing it, but I found that it usually doesn't work for me. And same with the very bottom nadir shot. I forgot to bend out my arm and take a picture directly 90 degrees straight down toward the ground. So that's why you see these black bars here. So let's just click out of this panorama preview window, and let's go into the Stitcher tab. Now this is the window that you'll see right before we save it as a JPEG. So my projection's on equirectangular. My field of view is 360 by 180. Always make sure that's 360 by 180 if you're doing equirectangular. The canvas size, I'll just click calculate optimal size. This will make the picture as big as possible without getting it pixelated. Next, the format, you want to change that to JPEG. It's usually on TIFF by default. And TIFF files are extremely large, so I like just saving them in JPEG mode. And then the other stuff, I just leave low exposure corrected, low dynamic range on, and that usually does it. And then, if you can, I would save it before you start stitching it, just in case it messes up or something. So you have all that there. Now we're going to click Stitch Now, the button right there. And it's going to ask you where you want to save your panorama. I'm just going to save it right here. Click Save. And now this window will pop up. And it's going to do its thing for about maybe 5 minutes or so. And after it's done, you can go into that folder where you saved it and take a look at it. Alright, so here's the final picture that it just spit out. Double clicked on the JPEG, and here it is. And now you can see that all those seams are gone. And it's not looking half bad. If we zoom in full screen, we can go around and look at it. And it's looking pretty good. There is this little part right here, though. You see this? The tree is kind of, it disappears on the bottom. And that's most likely because of the fact that we took this handheld. Remember, if you take it handheld, there's a large margin for error. So if you want to eliminate this, we're going to be going over how to take it with a panoramic tripod head later. So, but for now, this is looking pretty good. So I'm just going to right click on this, open with Photoshop. Now I'm going to make it into a stereographic from this equirectangular. So I already have the plugin installed. It's by Flaming Pear, and the plugin's called Flexify 2. So that's going to load here. I don't know why it's taking so long to load. Oh, it might be because I forgot to resize. That is why. You might want to resize the file because, as you can see here, it's kind of significantly big. So I'm just going to change it to, I don't know, 3,000 pixels by 15,000. Might make it a little bit smaller, so your computer won't blow up when it's trying to process all that information.
So here it is, finally. Now, first thing first is the input should be on equal rectangular, and the output, most likely you want it on stereographic. You can also use hyperbolic, that's what it was just on before. It's very similar to stereographic. But you can see that's one of the cool things about Flexify is that you can input a equal rectangular panorama and then output it to several other projections. So, for instance, I can make it a square and then just do that, and it automatically makes it into a square shape. There's just a lot of different projections, but for right now, there's so many. I'm just going to stick to stereographic to show you how it works. So, let's put all these to 0 here. Now, the latitude is the only one that you're probably going to want to mess with. If you put it to plus 90, you'll get a perfect circle. And if you move it to negative 90, you get a perfect planet picture. And the field of view slider, you can zoom it out by going to the right or zoom in by going to the left. So I'm going to make this a tunnel just like this. Right about here. And then I'm just going to click OK, and I'm going to let it do its thing. Alright, there it is. Awesome. If we zoom in all the way, we can see that, you know, it does get kind of blurry on the edges because we were using small JPEGs, and I also resized the file so I could go faster. But if you use maybe medium JPEGs or large JPEGs, that will go away. But you need to have a pretty good computer for your computer to process all of that information. So what about this big black hole here? Well, what we can do is just select it with the quick selection tool. We got that big black hole, and then let's expand the selection just by about 10 pixels to make sure that we have it completely. So let's go to Select, Modify, Expand. And this window will pop up. Let's actually do, I don't know, 20 pixels. Click OK, and there's our selection. Now let's push Shift Backspace and make sure that the Content Aware option is checked. Click OK, and it will then fill in that blank blackness with nice whiteness of the sky. And now remember, the Content Aware feature is only on CS5 or above. So if you have CS4 or below, you would want to use the Clone Stamp tool over here. And you would just want to Alt-click on an empty area in the sky, and then click like normal, and then paste that sky in there again. Just like so. And you're probably going to have to do it multiple times in order for it to blend in nicely. So that's how you take a handheld panorama. Now you can see that the handheld does work pretty good when you're in a big open environment. This environment was very open. There wasn't any objects very close to the camera. If you are in an environment that has objects very close to the camera, for instance like a pillar or a person, probably won't work out very well when you're hand holding the picture. So just keep that in mind. The handheld versions usually come out fine when you're in a big open environment, but not if you're inside or there's objects close to the camera lens. And even when we took them outside, you can see that it did mess up here, that one little area. So always keep that in mind. Alright, there's still one more thing I want to do to this picture, and that is make the foreground a little bit brighter, because you can see it did come out kind of dark. So what I'm going to do is just duplicate the layer, and then I'm going to create a layer mask on that layer. I'm going to go back and select the actual layer itself, and then click on the blending modes drop down box and click screen. And bam, everything is brighter. But there's kind of a problem here. The sky is brighter too, but I don't want to make the sky brighter, because if I make it brighter, it's just pure white. So what I'm going to do is grab a black brush and just paint in that area on my layer mask here, just like that, and it's done. So here's the before and after, and that's it. You can go to layer, flatten image, and make other adjustments to it if you want to. You could grab the rectangular marquee tool, hold down the shift key, and drag and drop from the top to bottom to make a perfect square if you wanted to, and then click image, crop. So that's how you do a handheld panorama. So now that we know how to do that, let's talk about how to take a perfect panorama with a panoramic tripod head.